start. Welcome everyone to Mondays with MOUS. This all started because we had quite a few presentations submitted for our MOUS meeting that happened last week. And so these were such great presentations, I wanted to extend this out to at least this year. So we're presenting not only on Zoom, but we're also presenting live on YouTube, which I'm watching as we speak. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Peter Koletzke, who's going to talk about designing a UI in a mobile device world, which we all know and love dearly. So take it away, Peter.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So this session started, the presentation started from some research that I did a number of years ago when mobile devices were just coming out, and we were looking at how our business applications had to use that kind of design principle. And I was trying to find some kind of coordinated standard or guidelines for how people are doing this and how we should be thinking about design now for business applications. And there were a lot of different answers to that question and no one, guideline. So I kind of threw all these things together into a pot, mixed them up, and I came up with what I got from all of that research, and that's kind of what I'm presenting. And usually when you listen to a class or you hear a session and there's some kind of quiz, it's usually at the end, but I'm going to start this session with a quiz. So the first quiz and only quiz is to identify these symbols. So do you know what that is? Don't all speak at once. And how about that one? Okay, nope. What about this one? And that one? And that one? And one more. Okay.
I think I know two.
You know two. Okay, well, yeah. But the point is, these are, so how did we know those symbols without any kind of explanation? And they're kind of universal. You go into any country and, those will be identifiable. So I did a quick kind of survey about where we've gone from and where we are now with the Oracle development tools. And I thought, well, it'd be interesting to see the changes over the course of time from, when we started with the Oracle tools to now, and how our thoughts about design have changed based on the technology. So, starting with character mode, the old green screen back in the old days, and it was all key presses. There was no graphics. It was sequential. This is a menu system, but when you had fields, there was sequential field navigation. You go from one field and tab to the next field, or back tab to the previous field, and then you could press, the PF keys, the function keys, and control key maybe in addition to that. And the key presses were very important, and you submitted the whole page all at once. So that was what we used with the first version of the Oracle tools, IAF, and then SQL Forms through Developer Forms 6.0. Those were all character mode. They could be displayed in character mode. Then we moved to graphics, which came in with client server, and the Forms application was installed on the client, so we had the option of using all the windowing capabilities, and we could do navigation between fields with the mouse, or we could tab still, but mouse was there, mouse click, and we saw decorative pieces that we could put into the UI design, buttons and menus, systems, and things that were a little bit more intuitive to use, particularly graphics. So this was SQL Forms 4. It started with SQL Forms 4.0 and into Forms 6.0, just client server. Next step was to go to the browser. So now we were displaying the form inside a web browser, and even though there was some client install of a Java runtime, there was not necessarily the necessity for a Forms runtime installation. So that kind of saved a bunch of work on the installation side. And we still had the graphics. The controls were pretty much the same, a little bit different because they were running in Java instead of a C type programming interface and windowing interface. But the interactions were pretty much identical. So Forms 6i to up to now 12.2, which is the current version. Then we got Light Client, which was the year of the internet. We got web controls. So now we're looking at HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And Oracle came up with this technology called UIX, which was kind of HTML controls on steroids. They added a lot of JavaScript so that it was more interactive, more like forms, but still based on HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So that was kind of pre Java 2 Enterprise Edition. Then we got Web 2.0. The industry moved into this new thing where there was more interactivity in the application, and you would get screens that looked like this, which would be more like the old client-server forms. So you could do scrolling without refreshing the whole page. You could, just refresh one and validate one field without refreshing the page or submitting the whole page. And it was based on, it was based on the JavaScript again, and it was the era where we had AJAX, which is asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And that's kind of continuing to the current time, but we don't think of it so much as AJAX anymore. So light client, Java 2 Enterprise Edition and afterwards. And the controls that we were using for Oracle applications were Oracle ADF Faces, 10G, and up to 12.2, which is the current version again. So ADF is still around, it's still being used in the applications in Oracle Cloud applications. The next and kind of where we are now step is mobile, which is more visual and oriented towards applications that are displayed in different display devices. And the technologies that we're using now are JET, which is the Java extension toolkit that Oracle created around JavaScript, MAX, the mobile application extension, and Visual Builder Cloud Service, which is now Visual Builder Studio, and Mobile Application Framework, MAF. So all of these use kind of a more scaled down visual approach. And this is the one that we're going to be concentrating on because this is kind of where we are now. So I did, when I did that study, I kind of figured out, well, we have to kind of compare these technologies on the left that we just looked at in the Oracle tools to, in different categories. So we know the display paradigms for each of these, and then we can look at the Oracle development tools that were used, which I just went through, and then if they used graphics, which started out no, and now it's been yes for a while. How data input was done and is done, and then navigation, are we using mouse or keyboard? And then user training, do we need user training is one big question. And then display, what is the actual display paradigm? What's the device running on? And the user training is kind of specific too, because that's when we were working in character mode. I remember the Oracle tools always came with a user manual, right? And it was like really thick. So you had to actually have users go through a training class, right, to be able to use your application. And sometimes it was very customized. So I looked at this comparison chart and I thought, well, yeah, you could read through this and it would take you a while to figure out the trends, and then you might get lost in that. So I said, this is really not very mobile oriented. This particular, you wouldn't see this table in a mobile device. So I said, this is anti-mobile, and let's do it differently. Let's do it in a graph, okay? So the y-axis on the left is very scientific measurements, none, a bit, some, more, a lot. And then on the x-axis, we've got the various technologies and kind of representing how time went, although of course there's still character mode applications around and there's still client server applications, but in general the trend goes from left to right. So we'll compare each of those parameters, each of those categories in this graph. Key presses, of course, in the beginning, character mode, that was it. Key presses were the only way to interact with the computer. And then now we're down to not very many key presses. Client server and through the graphics technologies, we had still a lot of key presses, but now we have very few. We still have the keyboard, but it's not used as much. Training, again, there was a lot of training in character mode, and then client server, we had some and a little bit less and less as we go along. The idea being your application should be intuitive, in quotes, right? So you shouldn't need user training. And now, people are not expecting to be trained when they have a mobile app. mouse, there was a very short period of time we're using the mouse, not short, but there was a limited time. Now we're not using a mouse. Graphics, we started with graphics and client server, and now it's increased over time, and now we're using a lot of graphics. And tap, swipe, and talk, I didn't even put that in the previous thing because it was only for mobile. We didn't really have that. Although, of course, any of these technologies, if you have ADA compliance, you've got talk capabilities. But generally speaking, this is not a standard thing with those technologies. So putting all these together, it's a lot of lines, but you do see some trends, and what you see are where the deltas are. The greatest deltas are here. One of the greatest differences is here, where we're going from character mode to client server, and that's natural because we're going to graphics. So there's a whole bunch of things you can add with the graphics capabilities and the mouse, right? So a lot of changes there. So we really had to rethink how we designed applications and how navigation worked, for one thing too. So, instead of just doing key press navigation, you're doing mouse navigation. The other big one was between the light client before Java 2 Enterprise Edition and then Java 2 Enterprise Edition, which was the more interactive controls. So now we're getting, more user interface interactivity, which means that the controls are really doing a lot of the work for you, and you're not waiting for a screen to refresh. So notice that the change is a lot different, a lot smaller than the previous one, the big one. The next one, which you will notice a lot of change in, is this last one, which is between light client and now mobile. So lots of change, lots of deltas. It's very different. So this is kind of a long way around. Yes, we have to think about design, in a big way now, because we didn't really. There's a long period of time where we were not thinking too much about how to design differently, but we have to think about how to design differently. So just thinking about general trends, the number of mobile devices exceeds the world's population. This has been true now for probably 3 years. So business users are expecting your application to comply with the applications they use outside the business. So there's little or no tolerance for training. And there's a study that was done that surveyed some users and kind of watched them in their user acceptance for applications that they download on their mobile device, and they found a 3-second acceptance time. So if a user looked at an app and it wasn't working the way they liked, without any training, they just downloaded it and started working with it, they had 3 seconds to accept it, and if they didn't like it, they moved on. That was kind of their very short acceptance time. Now, you don't have that necessarily in the business world, right? Your business users may not have a choice of which applications they use, but the factor is still there. Short attention span, obviously when you're working with a mobile device, you're used to having something that you can do really quickly. So if you're, walking from the store to the car in the parking lot, you don't have a lot of time, but you still want to get something done, hopefully not get run over. But the tasks are short. So that's one of the other factors we have to think about. And then the touch interface, so tap and swipe, which we know we didn't have before. That's something that has to be worked into the design. Orientation changes, so what happens when you make the screen narrower or wider based on the orientation. So all of this impacts the UI design. So the sections we're going to talk about next are just basically these 3 principles that I've collected the main tips into that I got from all my research, and then talk about standards, because it's nice to be able to look at something that somebody else has figured out and use that as an inspiration. I never say plagiarism, I always say great inspiration. And then some developer resources at the end, which I'll go through really pretty quickly. There's a lot of references to links that you can go back to and study a little bit later. So I'll start with the top 3 design principles. The main challenge with mobile user interfaces is the display side variances. And this WebSphere experience architect, James Lentz, did a study and did a white paper and kind of talked about the idea of mobile design way back in 2011, and kind of came up with this chart, which was at that point in time, the different sizes for these different types of devices that were mobile oriented. And of course, now everything's different. The sizes are bigger usually, and we've got folding smartphones and all, and laptops that are as big as your TV. But in general, the idea is that there's a lot of differences in sizes. So it's kind of like what we were dealing with in client server, where some users were using 600 by 600 by 480, or some were using 800 by 600, some were using 1024 by 768, and the pixels were different for different users. So we had to kind of figure out that the displays that the applications we were doing would display correctly in all those different resolutions. So in addition, now we got the orientation change, going from portrait to landscape. So, if you're looking at Amazon, for example, homepage in a landscape mode, and you switch to portrait mode, and the screen, if the screen didn't resize itself, which it does, but just if it didn't, everything could get really, really small, and it's kind of hard to read. So it's very important to be able to adapt to this orientation change. So, I said I was going to give you 3 principles, but I really started out with 20 because there were some websites that were talking about this, and they actually had 20 different things that you had to think about. So I said, well, all right, let me keep looking. And I looked and I found another one that was 10. And it turns out that those 10 were actually the 20, but they were kind of combined into the 10. So I said, well, that's still too many. We can't possibly remember or work on 10. So I got it down to 3. And basically these 3, I think, collect all of the 20 and 10 that others have come up with. And, there's lots and lots of variations on all this, but the generally 3 principles will do you justice. So the 3 that I came up with: design for mobile first, visual not textual, and simple navigation. So we're going to look at each of these, and then I'll show an example and just kind of show kind of what I mean with each of the principles. So design for mobile first. The first and most important is to use modern components. The tool sets now, the current releases of the tool sets like ADF and JET and MAF will be able to accommodate the gestures and orientation changes. So they have this thing that in the industry is called responsive design, which you've seen and you know about it. You may not know that word or that term, but it means that when you change orientation, the screen reshapes itself or resizes itself so that it accommodates the different width or the different the different display. So automatic resizing and folding, which means things move around. So, and if you have a mobile only application, I'm talking about business applications where there's a desktop or maybe a tablet or some larger display device as well as mobile, but it may be you have three possibilities, I think, for that. One is it's an application that's displayed only on the desktop and maybe a large mobile device like a tablet, or it's an application that's displayed on both mobile and desktop, or it's a mobile only application. But if you design for mobile first, you're going to be able to accommodate all of those. Plus, the users will have an experience that's more like what they see in their mobile device outside the business. So it's kind of, this is one of the reasons that we say design for mobile first. But if you do have mobile only, or you are supporting mobile devices, you can do things that interact with the device services on the device, like camera, GPS contacts. And adding social features could be done in any type of environment, the desktop or the mobile, because it's possible with both. So collaboration, instant messaging, and again, these are things that users on mobile devices have just become accustomed to. So some tips: using design patterns is a good thing. I'll show the Alta UI design pattern and standards later, but find something like that where there's been effort on user testing to come up with standards that will work for different types of screens. So you use that pattern, and then you incorporate all the work that's gone on to figure out how that works the best. Testing on the narrowest width device, so that'll give you an idea of how the view reacts to the orientation change, and being sure that the tiles, whatever boxes on the screen, move around with that width change, and resizing automatically. And the last one here, no horizontal scrolling, is something that we really figured out early on in all those technologies. Obviously in character mode you don't have scrolling, but when we got to client server, we thought, well, now we got scroll bars on the left, and we also have scroll bars on the bottom, or right rather, and we have scroll bars on the bottom. So we could scroll either way, but to make it simpler, we're going to either say don't scroll at all, right, which is kind of how we did it in the beginning of client server, or just scroll vertically, so the user doesn't have to deal with changing views a lot. They can just scroll down. And now web browsers are kind of people using web browsers are used to scrolling only vertically, so there's no horizontal scrolling. So demo, all right, so demo being this screen is showing a sample application that Oracle created that kind of demonstrates some of these principles, and it's they use the human resources application that we all have come to know and love through the many years of Oracle's samples as the sample data. And this is done in Java Extension Toolkit, which is primarily JavaScript and CSS. JavaScript Extension Toolkit, rather, which is JavaScript and CSS. And they've created components that use some of the frameworks that are around JavaScript to build up this interactive design. And what we want to look at, we'll look at this in pretty much as the sample for all these principles. But for the first principle, we're looking at this from the standpoint of the folding and the responsiveness. So this is in a web browser and a desktop, but what I can do is emulate what it'll look like on say a mobile device like a cell phone by narrowing the width, and that would be turning this into a portrait mode. And notice as I do this, the boxes reposition themselves, and there's a choice that the design is making over how these work. So if you notice, when they're not folded, the order that this appears in is left to right and then up and down. So if we narrow the width, About Me will appear underneath the picture thing, and then my notifications will appear under that if we keep going to the left. So I'll do that. So now we see this moving, and then it moves down. And then if we make it even narrower, for example, this would be a smaller type device, then the whole thing changes and we get rid of that picture. So there's been a decision about how to do that, or that's not as important when you're displaying this really on a narrow device. And the boxes kind of go away, but the contents of the boxes are still there. So, and you're still seeing whatever is being done to display the data. And then there would be, click-throughs if there's details that are needed. And again, no horizontal scrolling. We're just scrolling vertically, regardless of how wide this is. So it's just always vertical scrolling. The design pattern that's used here, again, is Alta UI, which, again, we'll look at later, but Oracle's done their user experience testing on this to figure out that there's particular areas of the screen where users look at to get their data. The first thing they do is look at a particular area. And so the most important things are put into that area. And then they've also kind of figured out how to display. This is obviously just a dashboard for an executive. So it's not necessarily how a data input screen would work. It wouldn't be the way a data input screen would work, but you can kind of see the principles as far as how the layout's done, and then just having the responsiveness. So that's kind of it for that one. So let's look at the next principle. And this one is visual, not textual. So what we're doing is we're simplifying the design elements, and everything that's on the screen uses very simple lines. There's not lots of curved boxes and tabs that are made up of 7 different graphics like they used to be in the first days of the web, or picture type tabs. No gradients or shades. It's more it's definitely simplified as far as the things that are being displayed. What you're going for is something that's easy to read, because it could be that this is a small device and you're looking at the display outdoors, which means you've got to have very bold colors and very saturated colors, and big icons, big fonts, big buttons. And using graphs helps because it's a visual way to display data. But you can do too many graphs. With a dashboard, there's quite a few graphs and different types of charts, but generally you want to be careful about too much, because it can overwhelm the user. So let's look at that. We'll look at that sample application in the aspect of visual, not textual. So what we're looking at, again, is a dashboard, but we're seeing data displayed in different ways. So if you look at the pie chart at the bottom, you'll see the kind of a standard thing where you just hover the mouse and you get a little detail about that, what that particular data element is made of. And then if there was even more to say about that, for example, you need to know what makes up that value, you could click on it. This one doesn't have the click through, but that would be a standard thing to do. Now, this is nothing new to the web. This is something that we've had for a while, but it's more common and more expected now. This is something that users would just say, yeah, well, of course, if I hover the mouse, I'm going to get some detail, and maybe not have to drill through. Maybe that we get what we want just by doing the hover, or it may just be that looking at this without even looking at the numbers will give you what you need. So as far as relative numbers. And we're also seeing some, like the MyArg activities, we're seeing emphasis of different numbers with colors. So different colors represent different numbers. And same thing for average rating, different colors and different numbers. But notice that these are very large numbers. So this would probably be something that was determined to be important to this particular user. So they put the numbers really bold and really big. Bottom left corner, we see a similar thing. We see numbers displayed for particular parameters, and you don't need to know too much about this. You could probably just look at the icon and say, well, yeah, now I understand that icon. I don't have to read the word appointments. The word appointments is actually not, it's necessary for the first time user, but then after that, you understand what that icon means. So then you just say, oh yeah, sure, 100 appointments and 10 tasks, just by looking at the icons. So it's just looking at getting a quick view by not having to read a lot. So we're again, visual, not textual, and just big everything really, and bold colors, and not a lot of variance in colors. Well, yeah. So here's there are different shades of this green in this chart, but generally, and that's basically a display of the relative numbers. But generally, we're not seeing gradients. A gradient type of wash. Okay, so that's probably pretty much it for the visual, not textual. Simple navigation. This is also important for mobile interfaces. It's got to be easy to return to the opening page, and we've had breadcrumbs for a while. The sample application doesn't actually have one, but it's got other types of navigation, simple navigation. And with the breadcrumbs, you've got something that builds up on the top of the screen, which shows the pages that you've been to, so you can navigate back and forth just by clicking those links in that navigation train. So content links are another way to do it. 2-minute tasks. This is, again, back to the short attention span problem. So trying to condense the things that are being done into a short task, and then maybe creating multiple tasks to do a larger project is the way to go. Summarizing essential detail, and then drilling down. So showing the stuff that's the most important on the top as far as data, and again, could be visual, could be textual, or could be both. It could be mouse hovers, and then having a drill down if there's detail needed. Shallow menus. So in client server, we sometimes built up menus, so when you click on a top level menu, you get a pull down, and then you see another option in that pull down, and you click on that and you get another menu that shows up on the right or left, and then there's multiple levels. So staying with 2 levels in a mobile interface design is better, because it's easier to navigate, and sometimes you can get lost with the multiple levels if it's more than 2. Scrolling vertically only. So this is a repeat from the design for mobile first, because it also has to do with navigation, because you're navigating the screen. And then having alternative views for the same data. The sample application has a card list, a map, and a list, but you may just have different ways to see the same data. And using lists for data entry. And this is something we've used all along as well. So it helps with data validation. It also helps the user too, because they don't have to type. So trying to avoid typing is a good thing. All right, so we're going to look at this in the sample application. Okay, so one of the navigation techniques is to have this kind of tab or button area in the top. Notice that this one doesn't have any kind of main menu, which some applications do, but this one uses these tabs, and the tabs show different different aspects of the organization. So in this case, it's the list of people, and when you click on a person, then it drills on into details on that person, and it starts with the About tab, or the About tile here, but you can look at different tiles to see different aspects of that person. And it may be that you don't even need to click on these tabs or these tiles. You can just get what you need from the numbers that are inside the tile. And then if you look at team, then you see the report tos here, and then you go to there and you get basically the organization chart navigation. The other thing you see in this is an example of how you're using icons to represent the text. So this is another visual, not textual. For example, the little telephone icon here, in client server, early days of client server and character mode, obviously we would have to say, put in the word telephone number here to identify what this is. Even though it just looks like a telephone number, we'd have to say what it is. And the same thing for the mobile number, which is just an icon as well, and then the email. So these would all be field prompts, for example, in applications before mobile. But now we can just put the icon in, and again, generally recognizable icon. Everybody knows about it. And if they don't, there's a mouse hover. There should be a mouse hover, although there isn't on this one. There should be. That is probably a bug, but it's something that you don't have to have a lot of words on the screen. So again, visual, not textual. Okay, so back to navigation. You saw drilling into the people in the org chart, and then looking at their details. And we can also go back and look at people in a list view. This is the card view, which basically just shows a single tile for each person. And the list view is just a different way to look at it. So you're navigating that way. And there's a search box here because, there could be, 5,000 employees or more. So you type something, you start typing in, and the list reduces as you type. And then you can drill in and check, the details of that person. Another standard navigation would be navigating back to the home page with just by clicking the logo, which is often in the upper left. So we can do that. Another one is this pull down on the login name. And this is kind of expected, I think, these days in almost any application, including web applications. And it turns out these are kind of in different places in different web applications, but the most common place is the upper right corner. And you usually get a sign out and preferences or settings or something like that in this pull down. But it can be another navigation item if there's something specific about the user. Okay, so that's kind of a demonstration of some of the navigation principles. A little bit more about searches. Selecting from a list, if you've got that capability, is a good idea. And auto completion, you saw how that worked just now in the sample application. And aiming for a single field like Google, and then voice enabling, if you've got the capability in the device for that. If it's a desktop device, you may or may not have a microphone, but if you know that you do, and or it is on being displayed on a mobile device that does have a microphone, then you can voice enable the search, which means there's less typing. You do have to have the software for the voice recognition, but there's less software, there's less typing on the user's side. Okay, so that's kind of the idea for the three principles. So now we're going to look at what standards are out there, and specifically a single standard that I found. First of all, back in history, right? So we did a little history trip before, and this is an example of a design that I received when I was working on a client project. The names have been changed to protect the innocent, but in 1998 we were doing Forms 4.5, and the graphics department came up with this design, and it was basically components that we had in Forms 4.5, but the display of those components was not at all something that we could emulate like this. We could drop in graphics like at the top, and we could drop in lines and things, but the table component we couldn't make look like this. We could now. There's style sheets that we can apply in Forms to make things look pretty much any way we want them to. But in the days of 4.5, that wasn't possible. Plus, there's that button in the lower right, which is the show profile, which has the arrow. There was no way to do that without, we could do some graphics and make it look similar. But we got something from the graphics department, and they said, and of course the company said, you've got to use this design that the graphics department came up with. And we said, well, yeah, but we can't. But so there was a compromise done. But the point is, there was no standard for this particular technology. Another one, and this was a same year, different client, name will not be divulged. The user, and this was a business user, had Microsoft Access, and they came up with this design. And we looked at that, and tried not to laugh, but we said, yeah, we could probably do that. And I'm not sure about that wood grain background, but we probably could do that in Forms. This was actually, I think it was 4.5, or it may have been 5.0, but still, either one of those. We could do it, but did we want to, was the question. I mean, it's really kind of an awful, we didn't say this, but it was kind of an awful design, because it was hard to read the prompts, and the fonts were strange, and it just was not what we wanted to, we wouldn't want to claim that we were designing that. So again, point being, there was no standard for this thing. So we came up with, let's look at, we had some books that we relied on for design. One was The Secrets of Effective GUI Design. This is way back, and that because it mentions OS2 and Visual Basic, which, we still have Visual Basic, but that was pretty early days, early 90s. But it was helpful for coming up with how to do client-server design. When we moved to the web, then it was a little bit different. So we were looking for standards, and we found this book, Web Pages That Suck, and it was good from the standpoint of looking at what doesn't work, and then trying to figure out how to make your screen not look like that. It was kind of an anti-standard. And then we got the follow-on book to that, Son of Web Pages That Suck. So there was really nothing out there as far as a coordinated standard. So Oracle came up with this standard called Alta UI for their cloud applications, and they released it at Oracle Open World 2014. Now the Fusion applications have become the cloud applications, which is Oracle's a business application suite now. And it's part of the Oracle user experience UX effort. So there's a homepage, and I'll go out there and I'll show you the screens a little bit so you can see what's out there and kind of experience that. So that's the next demo. All right, so we'll go to Alta UI. So this is the Alta UI website. And there's 4 basic buttons, and their screen is designed kind of in keeping with the standard that they're trying to promote, which is, let me widen this so you don't see the slide there, because that looks like kind of part of the screen. Right, so it's simple design, bold colors, and not a lot of gradients, and simple navigation. The navigation being these big buttons here, and then some textual stuff. So they're throwing textual stuff in, but you can really kind of not necessarily ignore, but you don't have to necessarily read that to get the idea. So if we go to the gallery, this is something that they've come up with as far as, again, based on their user testing, user experience testing, the kinds of screens that would work for different types of pages. So if you look on the left, you'll see, like if we wanted to design a dashboard, these are the sample layouts that you could use that coordinate with what they found to be the best type of layout for that particular type of screen. And dialogue, for example, these are sample dialogues, homepage, sample homepages, colored regions, forms, right? If you're doing an input form, there's like just one design. But then if you drill into that, you'll see the actual design. So you get an idea of what they've come up with for how things should work in that particular category. And then we're looking at mobile, but we could also look at browser. So there's browser versions of these as well. And well, so in this case, this one's just mobile. Those are just browsers. So these are mobile. All right. So I clicked on mobile. So you'll see it, displayed in a kind of a mobile looking device, and different things for different types of mobile interfaces. So that's the gallery, and it's really great from the standpoint of that they've done the research to figure out what that type of screen should look like. Demos. The 2 demos are the Work Better app, which I was showing you just now. That was the Jet demo that we were looking at, and it turns out that this is a broken link. The live demo goes to an error page, so I'll tell you how to fix that. And then the Fix It Fast app is one that you can actually create. If you're using Jet, they give you the method for creating this application yourself, but there's also an online runtime version of that, so you can go through and see how this works with a mobile emulator kind of screen here. So those are the demos. And that's Jet. Sorry, we got to go back to Alta UI. Okay, and then tips. And this is just a textual information about, I'm not sure where the styles went. Yeah, something happened to the styles. But you see, some textual descriptions about the different standards here, and they explain, what they're doing with the samples and the patterns, the design patterns. Yeah, it looks like their style sheet is out, unless there's something in my browser. Visual, so this is just examples or again, text about how visualizations are important, and things that you think that you should be thinking about when you're designing your visual displays. So it's worth looking, kind of browsing through that, again, from the standpoint of that they've done the research with users to figure out how things should work and how things work best. And they've also incorporated that knowledge into their applications. So they're using the tips that they're giving us for their work as well. So these are just, okay, these are just samples of the screens that we just looked at. Oh, here, this is what the tips should look like, all right? So this is with the style sheets in place. And one of the things actually in tips, which I probably blew by too quickly, is the design for mobile first. So that's one that's directly stated there. And it's not just Oracle that's stating that. I've found another website that's talking about it too. Visual content, we looked at that. Okay, so Oracle UX, user experience, is kind of the overall project that Alta UI is under. And I've got a slide on that. So let's go to the Alta UI slide. Yeah, so it's talking about how to implement the user experience in Alta UI principles. And there's 4 categories of things that you can look at in this area in the website. And one is this rapid development kits, which is something that you can use as starting points for ADF, Oracle Application Framework, Oracle Development Framework rather, or JET. They're talking about JET, although I think the JET one is coming soon. And they give you wireframe templates that you can use to build storyboards for samples that will actually look exactly like what you create in that technology. So that's pretty useful. And then there's sample code that you can plop in to your application that would help you get a head start on that too. So it's worth looking through this UX website just to see the kind of research that they've done and what they've come up with for standards and how they've thought about incorporating those into their applications. So again, they're using it for the cloud applications, but you can use it for your applications as well. Okay. Redwood. So Redwood, now that we've promoted Alta UI, they've come up with the next wave, which is called Oracle Redwood, and they call it Redwood Theme, which is something that they're using now to recast their applications, their cloud applications. And it incorporates machine learning and bots and what they call unfolding, which is these concepts are fairly general now. We don't have as much specifics and examples as we do for Alta UI. We just have the links that I show you here are the only things I could find on Redwood from the standpoint of something that's more detailed. But the idea was this is something that's using machine learning to, for example, figure out what the user is doing so that the screen flow can be based on personal navigation rather than a general screen flow that's for the whole application for all users. So things like that. And they also are using a different kind of color scheme and design scheme, which is based on Asian, African, and Aboriginal art. So you can see that now on Oracle.com. Actually starting last year at Oracle Open World 2019, they released kind of that look and feel, and it was all over the conference, and it's all over their website too now as well. But the idea is that they're moving towards something that's got a little more kind of artificial intelligence built into it. It'll be interesting to see how this works because we just don't have a lot of detail. It's something that they have to develop internally, obviously, to use in their applications before they start publishing it. So we'll keep asking and we'll keep letting you know if we hear anything more. That's kind of our job as Oracle Aces. Okay, so some developer resources. Now that we've gone through sample standards. Okay, most important tip. From all of the tips that I've given you, most important tip is use the modern components. Because they incorporate mobile awareness, they have the gesture and orientation awareness, and you can use them to do the responsive design type stuff. So again, if you have a wide screen like this and you go to a narrower screen, it reshapes, and you go to even narrower screen and it reshapes, and kind of changes quite a bit. The design actually changes. If you're doing just HTML and CSS, this is something, you can find this tip out there, but it took me a little bit of digging to find it. So for example, you've got this display with 5 boxes, colored boxes, and the width is narrowed. The underlined piece of CSS code is what does that. And then, if you get even narrower, then it forms a column. So, the code that I'm showing you is basically all HTML, but the style part in the first div inside the body is what you use to do that wrapping. And you need both the display and the flex wrap parameters. So for Jet, the JavaScript extension toolkit, I showed you the Fix-It demo, and the Work Better demo, again, is the one that's linked from the Alta UI website, and that's the link that it goes to, but that's broken. So what you do is you change, in that URL, you change Jet to Jet-620, and then you can get to what I was just showing in the demos. And it's basically, I was showing you that website, basically. So maybe at some point they will fix that link in the Alta UI, but for now you can get to it that way. So those are good, not from the standpoint of, this is not the Oracle Jet, it's actually a propeller plane, but these are good from the standpoint of, if you're using Jet, then these are things that you can create, and you get sample code that shows you how they're done, so you can use that as an inspiration for your code. If you're doing Apex, you just use the universal theme. So if you go out to apex.oracle.com/UT for universal theme, you'll get the screen on the right, which basically gives you all the different things you need to know about how to make your Apex app look like Alta UI. And if you're going to Apex 20.1, that aligns with the Redwood design. So it'll be the Chrome, the screens will look more like Redwood, which, there's nothing wrong with that, but it'll incorporate those designs. So maybe that's the way that we figure out what Redwood's all about, is to create an Apex 20.1 app. ADF, if you're using ADF, Shai Schmelzer, who is the product director, and I call him Oracle Guru Extraordinaire. He's very prolific with his blog entries and YouTube videos and all. Has done both for Alta UI using ADF. So you can go out to those links and take a look at those resources. And Google's actually created a nice description of how to design mobile user interfaces, and it's at this URL, and they have on their site, and you can get to it from that link above, what they call the mobile friendliness site tester. So you put in your URL for your application, and you can see what things look like, and they actually do an analysis of your code and say, what's wrong with it, if there is something wrong with it from the mobile standpoint, and give you some tips or ways to fix it. Also within Chrome, you may or may not know this one, which is the Chrome browser device emulator and mobile device emulator. So we're going to look at that live here, and I'll show it with the Work Better app. And the way you get to it in Chrome is in the menu, and you go to More Tools, and you go to Developer Tools, or you just do Control-Shift-I, if you can remember that. And it opens up the DOM navigator on the right, which is normally what you see, and you see your website on the left. But there's a button here that will toggle, it says Toggle Device Toolbar. Control-Shift-M, all right? So you got to remember all of these control things, or just go to the buttons. And this changes the display into a mobile-oriented display, and you can use the mouse to emulate your swipes, and you can navigate the application the same way that you would normally, but you're displaying it in something that's looking like it'll look like on the mobile device. And then in the top, there's a list of different types of devices. So if you wanted to look at an iPhone 6, 7, 8 Plus, this is how it would look with that. And then, there's a limited number, but you can get the different types like Moto 6C4. But your application is completely navigable this way. And so if you wanted to go back to the home screen, you go to the dashboard on the menu, and then you get that. And then if you wanted to display this in landscape mode, there's a little navigation or rotate button here, and that changes it to landscape. So that's a way that you can test your application kind of right away, even locally. If you're running the application locally, you can still test it here. You don't have to go out to the Google friendliness tester. Okay, so that's what this is all about. Yes, we did that. Okay, so I'm going to close here by with a quote, which is from Ted Turner. And this is how to go mobile. To be happy in this world, first you need a cell phone, then you need an airplane, then you're truly wireless. So I guess if you're a media mogul, you can afford an airplane, but I think a lot of us are are wireless in some respects anyway. All right, so let me see, before I do the summary, let's see if there are any questions.
Yes, we have a few people watching on YouTube and on this. If there's any questions, feel free to post them in the chat line or Q&A.
So I'll start, you can type those in now if you have any, and then I'll go through the summary and then I'll ask again if there's any questions. And Mike, maybe you can look and see, because I'm not looking at YouTube at all. Okay, so summary. Mobile apps have raised the bar for UI design. Now that we have this kind of pervasive use of mobile devices, cell phones, tablets, everything outside the business, users that we have inside our business are used to that. And so they're kind of expecting our applications that we create, for the business to be that way as well. Remembering the top 3 principles will get you pretty far as far as how to accommodate that expectation. Design for mobile first, and visual, not textual, and simple navigation and display. Starting with pre-built proven patterns, so go out there and find something that somebody's done and spent time on, like the Alta UI or Redwood, when we finally get more detail on that in Oracle's world, will again give you a way that uses some of the research that's already been done to figure out how best to display things. Using modern components, very important, because they basically incorporate the things that you need for the responsiveness, gestures and tap and swipe. Testing using multiple devices. If you've got multiple devices you're displaying to multiple devices, it's important to do that. If you're only displaying to desktop, for example, if that's your mode, then obviously you just have to be sure that you're complying with all the types of display monitors that the users will be using. But if you're displaying to, if you intend to display to mobile, like a cell phone or mobile as well as desktop, then you've got to look at all of those. Google Emulator helps, and also that friendliness website that I showed you, that I talked about, will help. Okay, so these are the books I've co-authored. And thanks for attending the MOUS Monday.
All right, Peter.
How are we doing on questions? Anything?
I don't see any questions, but I have a little comment. You had showed the wood paneled back screen.
Yes.
And I was trying to, in the process of trying to create, your little, I don't know what you want to call it, but with your name on it and the presentation, whatever that.
Yeah.
I don't know what the technical term is.
Yeah.
My first background was
wood grain.
Wood grain.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
But
Well,
I changed it because I was trying to see if you could see the letters, and you couldn't see the letters very good with the wood grain as much as you could with the light background.
right. Good choice. So you knew already about that. Well, that's
yeah. Well, I'm not very good at it. It took me over a week to. By the way, to see that little box, it took me over a week to do that. So.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well,
so,
but I think you get an A then because you avoided wood grain.
I did avoid wood grain,
and that was our exact that was our exact problem with that thing. You couldn't read things on top of the wood grain.
Yeah, that's what happened. And I said, well, I need people, because I just wanted to put on Twitter or on LinkedIn. And I just want people to read it. And so
good. All right.
Yeah, well, I did something right, and I didn't even know it. So
that's right.
But
yeah.
Well, thank you, Peter, for presenting. And
you're welcome, Mike.
Can you talk about next week's topic real quick?
Sure.
For the people online.
Yeah. So MOUS Monday.
Just an introduction to it, I guess.
Yeah. So MOUS Monday next week, I'll be talking about the table API, creating PL/SQL table API. So basically to speed up your application and make it easier to use and use your application technology stack a little bit better.
Cool.
So it's PL/SQL folks, may or may not be using this technique, but they may want to listen to that.
Okay, super.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to share a screen real quick.
Okay.
And then just show we have some other. Let's see what I want to share. So I have the website. Peter's presentation will be on either the MOUS.us website, which is MOUS.us mouse_Monday/mouse.pdf, and I have all the presentations going on here for the rest of the year. And then the other part is I do have it on my particular WordPress site as well, where you'll have the link to the recording and link to the thing. So anyhow, well, thank you, Peter. And if there's no other further questions.
I see a chat.
Yes.
Oh, that was you.
Yeah, it was me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So.
Okay, good. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Well, thank you, Peter, and we'll talk to you next week.
Very good. Take care. Have a good one, everybody. Yep. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.